Now, before we look at the epidemiologic transition model, some big picture ideas is as we look at the world as a whole, we are living longer. And what that means is we're also transitioning from more of our deaths being from communicable diseases or infectious diseases to non-communicable diseases. We can see this from 1990 to 2010 here in The Economist in their chart, in their pie chart. So we can see the red, communicable diseases, is becoming a lesser percentage of the pie compared to non-communicable diseases or non-infectious diseases. We can also see that when we specifically look at these changes, looking at different types of diseases. We can see for the most part, from 1990 to 2010, we see the red lines going down. What that means is less people dying from those communicable diseases and more blue lines going up, meaning more people dying of non-communicable diseases. So transition is occurring. Now we return to the demographic transition model. I talk about this early in the textbook because we're going to come across it time and time again. And we're going to come across it right now when we look at health. And so the demographic transition model, like all of these models, generally speaking, they explain how stuff works. They explain the patterns that we see. Not every country, not every part of the world fits perfectly into this transition model, but for the most part, we can see evidence that this model is true, accurate, in a good way to summarize some big picture ideas. And so this demographic transition model also overlaps very nicely with the epidemiologic transition model. And we can go ahead and now we're just going to use the same stages as we now look at health. As I've mentioned before, there are no countries today that are stage 1. So when we look at most of our human history, though, we were stage 1. So you look at that huge time period in which we were hunters and gatherers. For the most part, we were dying, infectious. We were, life expectancy was nothing above 30. I mean, we were very short lives. So we had epidemics, which is a term I haven't talked about yet, but just essentially very quickly a large amount of the population was wiped out. Pandemics means a large area, the entire world, or large, think of the Black Plague, in which huge numbers of people died. And so we look at how and why people died. Overwhelmingly is from infectious diseases or just essentially starving to death. Even more so, more people died from violent deaths, so competition with other hunters and gatherers, even animals. I mean, well, of course, a lot of our animals we've kind of taken care of. But for most of our human life, for most of human history, we were not dying because of Alzheimer's, heart attacks, cancer, all of that. We were dying because of these infectious diseases and more violent deaths. So we look at this lifestyle when we were hunters and gatherers. One of the characteristics is we're actually fairly healthy in the sense that we're always on the move, very highly active, very obviously very low obesity rates because we're always on the move. We're eating, diets high in carbs, high in fat, so we, pretty good diet. When you look at this, some of these new diets actually revert to our stage 1 days when we eat nuts and berries and meats and what have you. And so some would say, when you see someone at the gym, and you see, someone crossfitting, they're really ripped. What they're essentially showcasing is what our human bodies actually used to look like. Not so much the bodybuilders, but the people that are really fit, really lean. It really speaks to what we looked like during this time period, which we were overwhelming. Most of the world were hunters and gatherers, and so over time our bodies have changed. So when we change and get real physically fit, it's essentially showcasing that's our human body actually from our long days ago.